I first got going in the networking arena when I was out at the University of Hawaii as a graduate student, and I stayed on working on the Aloha project, AlohaNet, with Norm Abramson and Frank Kuo. And that was really the initiation of the Aloha random access channel stuff that carried on into the Atlantic Packet Satellite as part of the technology. In 1975, I went to work at BB&N in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to work directly on the packet satellite effort. It was just cranking up, DARPA funded, and I arrived and was handed an ARPANET IMP to proceed to put some code in a module in front of it to talk to the satellite as the first step in bringing up the packet network.
I assume it was your AlohaNet experience that made you a logical person.
Yeah, actually it was something that I had done related to the Aloha work. As part of that, I had developed a satellite protocol that a reservation protocol along with several others. And
Before we were interrupted, you were talking about the satellite protocol.
yeah, yeah, I think the connection to going to BB&N was the work I had done as a grad student on developing a satellite demand assignment protocol for a satellite broadcast channel, very like the one we did in the Atlantic, that combined or applied the principles of the contention Aloha stuff to many users sharing the satellite. I think I called it Reservation Aloha, but there was a number of different protocols that people were inventing at the time, so I'm not sure. And in any case, that in fact had a bearing on the resulting SatNet protocols, in that when the project got going, that was formed a basis for, or part of the framework for what eventually evolved as the full-blown CPOTA or POTA protocol. So anyway, that was the link, I guess, that got me there.
You were doing that for...
I was doing that as part of the Aloha System project. In fact, we had, the Aloha System was a ground radio system, but actually we had a contract as part of, we were getting connected up to the ARPANET on the mainland, and so the activity in the Aloha project extended to looking at protocols for a satellite channel to extend the Aloha to a satellite channel as part of that connection into the ARPANET. That, in fact, a satellite link was eventually used to connect the Aloha system into the ARPANET, but it was just a standard satellite link. It didn't have any fancy protocols on it. But that was the reason that I think it was DARPA funded at the time, kind of a separate activity to look at satellite protocols. And in fact, we started having some get-togethers with some of the BB&N people.
Okay. So that's what got you hired at BB&N.
I think that was the connection, yeah.
So go back to, so you've begun at BB&N.
Well, when I arrived around January, February of '75, as I was handed an ARPANET IMP, I think some preliminary work had been done on it by Randy Retberg, who was one of the early key people in laying the groundwork for the what became the satellite IMPs. Had done the synchronization design and so forth. Anyway, my task was to put in a module up front that talked to the satellite. Initially, we were just aiming at getting 2 points going, and then the third came in fairly shortly after that. And I've been trying, since this event arose, as preparation to remember just what it was that I put into the satellite imps at the time, or into those actually ARPANET imps for that module. I think the first thing we actually brought up was a simple slaughtered aloha channel, contention channel, just because we needed we needed to implement synchronization for the slotting, and slaughtered aloha was about the simplest thing we could do. So I think that's what we did, but I can't be sure.
But would you have records of?
There's probably something around somewhere at BB&N, some old reports, but I don't have anything. Unfortunately, I retired back in 2002, and when I moved out to California in 2004, I said, oh, I'm not going to need any of this stuff anymore, and didn't bring any of that with me.
That's a common story. Okay, so when did you meet some of the people?
Well,
Ginny's-
Ginny came in a little bit later as peripherally. She came in as part of the overall project in terms of having meetings and everything, but she was working for the other division at BB&N on the gateway itself. And so she wasn't directly involved in the packet satellite network design. I think Erwin Jacobs made an appearance around mid-year of 75, somewhere in there. Came to BB&N to meet with us and talk with it. Dave Walden was in charge of the project at the time. And Erwin had been designated by Bob Kahn to provide the technical leadership on behalf of DARPA for the overall project. So that's when Erwin came into the picture.
The satellite portion.
Pardon me, for the satellite, yes. And then we had another person hired into BB&N, Robert Weisler, who was a key figure in some of the programming of the early satellite imp. Randy remained a key figure in getting it up. It was around, I think, maybe around the June time frame when we put the first modified imp into a ground station at Edom, West Virginia, and got that talking with the ComSat ground station there. And in August,
But then it had to,
well, it
had to have another
didn't have anything else to talk to yet.
right.
We got that one just interfaced. And then in August, Randy and I went over to Goonhilly, England, to do the second installation at the ComSat ground station at Goonhilly. And that was an eventful trip. First of all, the old steam engine that took us from London down to Goonhilly broke down twice, I think, on the way. But when we...
1970s.
1975, yeah, still running the steam engines
Yeah,
back
I was
then.
in England then, but I don't, wow, that was
On the southern run, anyway. And we got into the air station and proceeded to try to bring up the satellite imp, and I forget what happened, but the whole thing crashed, and I think the code was wiped out or something. So Randy, being a very inventive fellow, wrote about 5 lines of machine code for the 316, Honeywell 316 machine we were using, and I think it was 316, that went up over the satellite and brought in the code from the either from the ARPANET itself, somewhere else, I don't remember, possibly from the Edom Earth Station. But he did some clever thing that actually went up and brought things in over the satellite link and got us up and going. We had,
I mean, brought in software from somewhere else.
yeah, brought in software over the satellite link. And of course, the ARPANET had already been for a few years now doing that sort of stuff of
Yeah.
loading itself off of other imps over the ground link. So that wasn't in itself, earth-shaking. But I do remember we had, the usual amount of bugs associated with trying to bring up the very first code to talk to the other station. I don't think we quite got it working that month. I think we had to go back and do some more work, or we remotely did some more work to it. But that was the August of '75 when we had two modified imps to talk to each other over the satellite.
And in England, who was controlling the ground station? That was who owned it?
Well, the British Post Office, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Peter Kirstein was the head of the research group in England, yeah.
So you were going down, and, I mean, was this to them remarkable, sort of putting in this strange newfangled...
Well, yeah, I think that was, something very new. I really don't recall or if I even had much interaction with the people there, but I think Bob Kahn spoke well to that last night.
Yeah. So no particular... Installing them was fairly straightforward. Technically...
The hardware
technical
hardware installation was, I think, fairly straightforward, as I recall. It was the software we then had to get debugged, yeah.
And how much of that was customized to the station? I mean, in other words, once you had done one installation...
I'm not sure, that the software cared about at all about
Right.
where it was.
Okay.
The synchronization algorithms measured its round-trip delay up to the satellite and back down to that particular station, to that satellite imp, using timestamps, using a clock in the computer. And so it could calibrate itself relative to how far in time it was from the satellite itself. And each station did the same, and then the synchronization algorithm took their differences in propagation time into account to allow them to synchronize. Other than that, and that was all common code. I don't think there was anything unique to the station that I can remember.
So the total amount of time to do this might be... You would go, and how long did you spend in Goonhilly Town?
Oh, I think we were there for at least a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
And had you traveled outside? Yeah, you've been to conferences.
Not,
Had you traveled outside the States before?
let's see, other than Hawaii, which I guess was a state, I can't remember. I'm not sure that I had. No, I think that was the beginning of my international travel, which was a good project to get into for that.
Yeah, Ginny described it as very exciting for
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
And that there was a real feeling of community with some of the people involved in other countries.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We had the first full-fledged meeting, I think, was in the fall at Linkabit Corporation in San Diego of the project, at which I can't say for sure who all was there, but I would expect I think the Norwegians and the UCL people, Peter Kirstein's people were there. I can't be sure of that. We also had a meeting project meeting in London at UCL, I think, in the fall of possibly even September of 1975.
And so, describe the feeling when you met these people.
Well, it was interesting. It was all kind of exciting. It was all a fun project to be involved with. It was a little different. There was a British Post Office representative there at the meeting who, they were a little more official than the U.S. People tend to be. But it was an exciting time. Yeah.
And okay, so that's, once you had two nodes going effectively, it was operational then.
Yeah. Now again, when those two nodes actually started really talking to each other successfully, is hazy in my mind. I think it was more towards the end of '75 that we actually had them going well, and I remember Robert Weissler and I, or somebody else and I, was in the network control center for the ARPANET, of which this was just a part of the ARPANET at that point. We brought them up as a link in the ARPANET, albeit with this funny D-band assigned, in effect, protocol, or bandwidth sharing protocol, slotted aloha, over this half-duplex channel. So, and that gave some interesting results. I remember being in the network control center fairly late in the evening, and when we were doing some experiments, sending some test traffic over it, or even some real traffic over it. And all hell broke loose in the ARPANET monitoring and control center, in terms of the control center's ability to get information from each of the different ARPANET imps and talk to them. They lost that ability in waves that were kind of sweeping over the network. It could have been totally coincidental. In fact, I don't think I've told this to anybody else yet, because it was kind of sensitive at the time. But and I didn't want them to cut off our experiments. But I suspect it was due to the, or certainly could have been due to the demand assigned channel, the slotted aloha channel we had just that we were using, whereas the ARPANET routing algorithm at the time, assumed fixed full duplex bandwidth links. So that could well have been the reason. In any case, we stopped our experiment for the night.
Right, because you were using, in the slotted aloha is where it's just waiting.
Yeah, you just chop the timeline up into slots, and then if a station has a packet to send, it simply sends it and hopes it gets through, and you get a positive acknowledgement back if it did. If it didn't, after a suitable time, you try again. Very similar to Ethernet,
But
basically.
this was where the time was just automatic, it wasn't, I mean,
The slotting was the synchronization, which was the basis for all the other protocols we used too.
so what sort of, you had it running, what were you running over it? You said it became part of ordinary ARPANET.
Well, that again, I have to be careful here in what I can accurately remember. At that time, there were no gateways. It was simply, again, a module in an ARPANET imp, and it was connected to other imps, connected to an imp or a terminal imp at UCL, I believe.
Okay, but no connection, obviously,
And
without a gateway, yeah.
no, there were no gateways involved. We were just directly connected through landlines from the ARPANET interface side of the imp to another imp. So whether we actually ran traffic through it or the ARPANET people fixed up the routing protocol so that it effectively didn't see our channel there, which was probably the case. We probably just ran some test traffic over it. I can't be sure of that. At some point, a little bit later than this, might have been in '76, we brought up a fancier protocol called Reservation TDMA, which was similar to the protocol I had developed out in Hawaii, with the exception that it did have separate reservation slots, small reservation slots in each frame, which was a definite improvement on it.
So the
But
throughput, yeah.
but we only had two, and I'm not I can't remember when the Edam station came up, the third satellite, the third IMP. Did Paul Spilling happen to mention that
He
when that
mentioned that he
happened?
went to Goonhilly down and, right, I think that was that was the third, clearly.
Yeah.
I don't know the time.
Yeah, the Tanum Sweden Earth Station and the satellite IMP for that, I would guess came up in '76 sometime, but I cannot remember exactly when. In any case, we had 3 stations at some point, probably when we switched to the reservation TDMA protocol, which simply used fixed assigned reservation slots, for one for each of the 3 stations, which with that small number is what you would do. So the channel, at that point, the channel shouldn't have been having any collisions or otherwise, contention problems, and probably operated reasonably well. Again, the focus was on understanding the synchronization issues and how well the synchronization was working, and how well, in general, our overall transmissions were working with the satellite. At what point did we switch to the satellite IMPs and we replaced the ARPANET IMPs with the satellite IMPs with its own complete set of protocols and software? I don't know. I can't remember. I wish I could
Roughly
tell you, but
what period? By the way, you have a very good memory for dates. Most people are not getting even to within a year.
well,
much
that
less
first
months.
that 75-year, the trip to Goonhilly and all of that was, and Edam was things that stand out. In fact, I remember most of the meetings we had on foreign soil, especially because they involved new and exotic
memorable
places.
ones?
Well, they all. The only ones that during this time frame that I went to were London and then Oslo for the.
And you visited the NDRE.
Yes, I'm sure we did. The meetings I recall in Oslo were actually in downtown Oslo at a hotel, but yeah.
And so you met Paul and various people there.
Yes, well, at the first meeting in Norway, I guess we met Ingvar Lund, who was the head of their effort, I guess, and Paul Spilling. I definitely remember Ingvar. I'm not sure exactly when Paul Spilling was in the picture. He may have been there the whole time.
But Ingvar was the head of.
Ingvar was the head representative of the Norwegian group. Yeah.
Okay. And so those are the only 2 meetings, or there were others?
The 2 that I remember attending in Norway were the. You talking about the Norway meetings?
Well, on foreign soil, you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, we had a meeting in London almost every year. I think from the inception, we had the one in around September or so of September, November of '75. We had another one, and we maybe even had 2 in '76. Not sure. We had certainly had one in '77 and '78. At
And
least one a year
typically,
there.
who would have come to those? So you were
Oh,
saying-
well, Peter Kirstein, of course, had most of his people or all of his people there since it was local. The name I remember is Steve Treadwell, and I think Peter, perhaps Higginson, I can't be sure of his last name, and there were others. And then in Norway, I don't remember beyond Ingvar and
And Paul.
Paul. Yeah.
But would they have come to London, Paul and Ingvar?
Oh yes, they came to our meetings in the U.S. as well.
So in a typical meeting, the group would be,
Typical meeting would for sure include Peter Kirstein and Paul Spilling and Ingvar. I think both, as far as I remember, attended all of our meetings. Yeah, we had our first. I think our first full project meeting was kicked off at Linkabit in San Diego in the fall of '75.
okay.
That
So
may have been the September meeting, and then maybe we had a meeting in London after that.
And Irwin Jacobs was,
Irwin Jacobs headed up the project. He was the architect of the whole thing. And he in particular pushed for, the focus was on the channel protocols, was on demand assignment and sharing of this satellite channel by many ground stations. I mean, we only had 3 at the time, and we had a very relatively low data rate or low bandwidth single channel to use, because that's all we could get. But you know, the aim was to develop protocols for sharing relatively high bandwidth channel eventually among lots of ground stations, and for using it for all manner of traffic, not only of datagrams but of voice traffic, stream traffic, and that was a big focus of it, and also of providing priority and let's see, what did we call? Well, it was priority-oriented demand assignment. Of course, that was the name of the game. So anyway, Irwin really pushed the boundaries on developing a protocol that would be totally distributed in its control, so that we could explore that to its hilt, and as well as pushing the limits on just how fancy we could get with the demand assignment protocol.
how many you can have.
Well, and just how many tricks we could play with the whole thing to really get the most out of the channel and let everybody have everything that they wanted in terms of voice, data, priority handling, delays that they'd like to see, and so forth.
Yeah. All the bells and whistles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they kind of kicked off that meeting as Linkabit hosted that, and then it rotated.
Then we rotated, yeah. We had a couple of meetings at BB&N, 2 or 3.
And who was your boss at BBN?
Well, it started off being Dave Walden in '75, and I think Bob Bressler took over from him in probably '76, maybe early '76.
So by the time of the 2-network transmission that certainly Don has written about in '76, that was summer of '76, I believe.
That was probably just PRNet and ARPANET, is that right?
I thought there was a SatNet.
Well, '77 was
The
when we
three.
did the 3.
But there were no tests between the SatNet and either, well, ARPANET, certainly.
Yeah, I don't think the gateways were ready much before then. You know, Jenny was working away furiously on the coding of the PDP-11 gateway, and I don't think that they were ready to go before '77. I think
Okay.
that's why that event took place when it did.
Because the third one was available.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm sure there were different stages of the gateway, but as Jenny had said, I think last night, that for the one over on the other side of the pond, she had to deal with this 9.6 kilobit line
Right.
and all of that. So
Next to the
yeah,
50
so that I'm sure that complicated life for her. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. So then really first contact between the SRI group you knew was involved under DARPA, but there was no particular.
We didn't, Ginny, I'm sure, had a lot of interaction with them, but no, the SatNet project per se, we did not have any direct interaction with the packet radio people. It was just a separate project. As far as I know, Irwin might have, but as far as I know, as a project, we didn't.
So when did you first meet those people, or did you?
Now that's for me. That was a different event timeline, I guess. While I was still out in Hawaii, Bob Kahn started up the Packet Radio project back in when early '70s, '72 maybe, and I was still at Hawaii on the Aloha project until '75, and so they I can't say the Aloha project was a springboard for the packet radio effort, but we had some experience at, at hand to offer. So I remember attending a couple of the packet radio project meetings early on. One up on Long Island with Network Analysis Corporation and at SRI. And the SRI guys came out to Hawaii, I think, a fair amount to see what we were doing, basically.
So you knew them and you knew
Yeah.
they were involved in a DARPA contract.
Oh, yeah. No, we knew, and I in particular was, conversant with what they were doing because it was very closely related to our Aloha stuff initially.
So then Ginny finished the Gateway. When was it operational?
The Gateway? Well, that I cannot speak to. That's Ginny presumably talked to that. I have to say my focus was very constrained to the SatNet project. I mean, I was really kind of buried inside of that, worrying about the protocols and all the different things that we needed to do to make SatNet work well, and and then focus more specifically on our effort at BB&N, leading the several different people we had on the project at that time and their software development, protocol development.
So were you aware? Go on.
Well,
No, but I mean, when it came to the 3-network transmission, was that even something that you knew they were doing something, but
yeah. No, I have to say honestly that it was something that at the time at the moment it happened, I wasn't aware of packets whizzing by or anything. I don't remember what I was doing at the time.
What were you doing on
I
November
can't.
22nd?
Yeah, no, it's not one of those dates.
So, I mean, you knew that they were going to try and hook up the different networks.
Oh yeah, I knew that that they were working hard at getting TCP going over the 3 networks.
And
Sure.
you were doing end-to-end sort
Sure.
of test.
Yeah.
But I mean, was that kind of a stated goal that you guys were working toward, or that was just one of many milestones?
Again, our focus. I think I could speak for Irwin and for the rest of the players, possibly not for NDRE, who were a little more close to the gateway. Our focus was on the satellite, not on internetworking. That was a different game.
There's another layer
Yeah,
on top.
yeah. We were developing great and glorious demand assignment protocols and dealing with the problems of a broadcast channel and distributed control. Distributed control was a major focal point of our work because of the challenges that involved. In fact, we had learned a lot of things from that.
So any other sort of thinking of the internetworking as a theme, any other things that you want to add?
Well, the bit that I said earlier about when I was down in the Network Control Center and all hell was breaking loose and everything, I think was, I remembered that and brought it up because I think it was relevant to pointing up the fact that we really needed to break the satellite network off as a separate network. That to try to make it play as another link or as a directly integrated part of the ARPANET would have been very, very difficult. And I think probably insurmountable challenges to routing and other algorithms that were in the ARPANET. It was just a different kind of a network of channel. So to me, that spoke of the need to separate it out and
The opposite
which we
of
did.
internetworking.
Pardon me?
The opposite of but I mean, to split it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really needed internet to be internetworked. It needed something to separate it out. So I think that was pretty clear to most of us early on.
Yeah, but it's too incompatible.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that really played it up. And of course, packet radio net was an even more foreign object relative to the ARPANET in terms of the nature of that network. So I don't think you would have wanted to try to integrate that into the ARPANET either.
So following the 77 transmission, and that was a very early proof of principle. So what were some of the key milestones right after that?
Well, I think, again, from my limited focal point of looking at just SATNET, the key milestone was to get the new CPOTA protocol, or POTA protocol that many of us have been working on, that Irwin had led, implemented and up in the channel so that people could begin to do measurements on it and experiments with it. And unfortunately, again, because I don't have any of my documentation anymore, I can't tell you when we in fact got that out into the network, but I think we did get that out before our, 1978. I remember the summer of 78, we had a meeting. It may have been our last major project meeting, per se, of SATNET in London, hosted by UCL, that in my mind represents the culmination of the project. Now, it certainly went on after that with measurement activity and monitoring activity, and for some number of years beyond that. I also moved off of the project around that time, around the end of 78, moved on to the wideband satellite network project at BB&N. So I began to lose some of the detail of what they did after that, but summer of 78 was, in my mind, is the culmination of that development effort.